I think it's starting to record. Give me a second. Hey, everybody. This is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Oh, let me do that again because I heard a beep. Hey, everybody. This is Marina, your podcast host at UNBOSSED. Today, my guest is Laurie Joyner, president at Saint Xavier University. Welcome, Laurie.
Oh, thank you. Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Doing great. Happy to be here with you.
Awesome. I see you're in the office for the people that are watching us on video. How is that going, being in the office?
It's going great. We never left.
Oh, is that right? Tell me about it.
It is true. So many of our mission critical staff members have been here really all throughout the pandemic. And so it's been, in many ways a blessing because we've got to know those individuals so much better than we would if we were just, going about our regular routine. So, some areas like our School of Nursing and Health Sciences, those students had to continue with their clinical assignments or do simulation in the lab. And so the entire School of Nursing and Health Sciences has really never left either. So it's been kind of a mixed bag. Some faculty have taught face-to-face, some hybrid, and some completely online. But everybody's doing great. Enrollment's been really very positive. We've enrolled 3 of our largest and most diverse classes over the last 4 years.
Wow.
So we're super excited about that. And
yeah,
graduated thousands of students, which is ultimately the goal.
Amazing. Yeah. And I would love to get into, philosophical conversations about the future, the current state of education and the future state and where you're thinking about taking Saint Xavier. Sure. But before we do that, I would love for my audience to hear something about you. Can you tell us about Laurie growing up as a little girl? Do you have a story that is intrinsically you?
Yeah. So, I think things have been pretty consistent throughout my life. So I grew up in a really close-knit family in New Orleans where, faith and family and education were always super important. Nice. And to be honest with you, that's a theme that I would say has persisted until today and with my own children. I guess if I had to think of a story, one thing that stands out that my parents always said is I never asked for toys or for dolls or anything for Christmas or birthday. I always wanted books. So I started reading, I think younger than many people. And still, it's my favorite thing to do. So I read everything I can get my hands on. And I've always really had a passion for school and education. And I think that's probably why I never left.
That's beautiful. I love to read as well. And I will ask you for books recommendations towards the end here. Yeah. Do you know of, or can you remember of any books that as a young girl or young woman, they really marked you? If you could name 1, 2, what would they be?
Well, I don't know why this one's coming into my mind because I was super young when I read it, but I really love the book. I think it was called Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nymph. And I'm not exactly sure why that's coming up right now, but I just remember I really loved that book and I read it over and over again. And of course, as a really young child, we had those beautiful sort of Disney books, that somebody gifted us or whatever. And I would just read those stories over and over again. And I still actually have those books. That's another crazy thing. I never get rid of my books. So I have I think every book that I've ever owned.
Wow, that's amazing.
Which is pretty expensive when you move from place to place.
I know. Last time I moved, we had only 10 boxes, 15 boxes of only books.
Yeah.
And the movers are not happy about moving those heavy boxes.
Exactly.
Oh, that's so good. So you were in New Orleans, and then would you tell me a little bit about your transition and how you ended up ultimately in Chicago? And you studied here in the area, I believe. But how did you get here from your own words?
Yeah, so I guess when I reflect on this, it really is a steady theme throughout my life. So it was really my undergraduate education at Loyola University in New Orleans, which was a Catholic institution dedicated to liberal learning, right? I was a first generation college student, and it was really those 4 years that completely like opened the world to me and transformed my life. And quite honestly, it was during that time that I think this dream was born. And the dream was for me to do something with my life that would make that experience available to other students like me, whose families didn't have a lot of money, but who were curious and wanted to learn. And so I decided I wanted to get my PhD and become a sociologist. I fell in love with the discipline of sociology because I just thought it explained so many issues, social issues in our world. And so I wanted to go back and become a faculty member and hopefully mentor and inspire other students like me to like go off and change the world for the better. And so that's really where it started. The dream of mine and my passion and for higher education started as an undergraduate.
What about that experience gave you this? What was it about that experience? Because I mean, thousands of students go to college and millions of students go to college, and not everybody comes out being like, I want to be a president of a university.
Yeah. Well, by the way, I never wanted to be a president. I wanted to be a professor.
A professor, teach.
My dream was to be a professor, right? Like the whole presidency thing didn't come until later. But I'll tell you, it's why I'm still so passionate about what we do at Saint Xavier, because I think that liberal learning is first and foremost about helping students discover who they are and what they value, and it also helps develop like transferable skills that are going to help them throughout their life, right? Like critical thinking and effective communication. But literally, when you put those two things together, like I think for some of us, we're blessed to discover our passion and our purpose. And that's what happened for me. And quite honestly, that's what I hope happens for our students here at Saint Xavier. You spend so much of your work, you spend so much of your life at work that you have got to love it. You've got to be energized by it. Yeah. And so that's what I think we do at places like Saint Xavier.
I love that. And so you went on to study about sociology, and you have a pretty solid track of kind of like working your way up. At some point, you were a professor, and then a dean, and then interim vice president and vice president. How was that experience of the career progression for you as a woman? So and correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not that many women presidents of university in the first place. So I can imagine that the representation of women as you went up the ladder got thinner and thinner. But I would love to hear what was your experience, because that's my bias, at least from my understanding based on the data that it's out there.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And this is one of the reasons, quite honestly, we need our men. When I think back to the mentors in my life, I can clearly outline 11. But of the 11, 9 were men, right? And 2 were women. And I've been so fortunate that 10 were fabulous. One that I reported to, not so great, but that's not bad odds, right? 1 out of 11, the rest of them are phenomenal. But what happened for me is after I earned tenure at Loyola New Orleans, my dean and one of my female mentors at Loyola recommended that I become an associate dean. And I was very reluctant because remember, my dream was to be in the classroom teaching and learning, right? But I finally said yes. And right when I started that appointment, they both nominated me for this most amazing professional development opportunity. It was through the HERS network, and it was like a boot camp. So I went away for a month. I left my 8-month-old son, my second child.
Oh my God.
Away for a month, lived in the residence hall at Bryn Mawr College with all these other female administrators. And then they had female presidents from all over the country come and talk to us about readings and do role playing and case studies. And it was just this really phenomenal experience. And the one other thing they had us do that was very uncomfortable for me at the time, because I was barely an associate dean, right? They had us career map ourselves to the presidency.
Wow.
And again, I don't know, it's probably like a gender thing, right? Like, I don't know, it felt odd to like think that I could be a president or something. But what's so ironic about that, Marina, is like years later when I was a provost, I actually came across that career map. They wanted us to put the title, the timeline, and how much money we thought we would make.
Uh-huh.
And literally, like my progression matched that, like to a T, right? And so it was really those mentors, I think, that saw something in me well before I saw it in myself. And then during that experience, I remember we did the Myers-Briggs, and I was like super strong ENTJ. And when they were talking to us about what that meant, I'll never forget, one of them said, ENTJs can do the presidency and live to tell about it.
Wow.
It kind of stuck with me. And I thought, well, you know what? Maybe this is something eventually I could do. And then it was a conscious decision not to skip any steps. And I want to point out to the audience, that's very gendered too. Like the literature is really clear on this. For us, we want to be super prepared. We want to know everything there is to know before we'll like embrace an opportunity, for many of us, generally speaking, right? Whereas historically, men, whether they have all the boxes checked or not, they just like embrace the opportunity and run with it, right? So I fell a little bit into that gendered camp. I didn't want to skip any steps because I really wanted to make sure I knew what I was doing. But I would encourage those behind me, you don't have to have every box checked, right? If you're a hard worker and you're a lifelong learner, you're going to figure it out and you're going to be fine. And so I would say if it aligns with your core values, your passion and your purpose, like totally grab onto those opportunities.
Oh, I love this story. This is so cool. And I love the advice to just like, don't feel like you need to be prepared to grab onto something. Yeah. I feel like I've done it in my career too, where I wanted to get the most information possible. I wanted to walk in knowing the things that I needed to know, which is almost impossible anyways.
Yes.
I wonder if you have any more insights about this topic specifically that you can provide, having studied, sociology and obviously sounds like you've studied yourself and other women's career often. So is there anything around failure that is stopping us that you think is stopping, generally us from taking that step? And if it is failure, like how have you handled those moments in which, perhaps not everything went the way exactly that you wanted it to go?
Yeah. So, I'm way too humble to speak generally, right? So I can only speak from like the experiences I've seen. I do think there's greater pressure on some women in certain positions because, this. We, in many cases, tend to get the more challenging leadership positions in some of the more challenging organizations, right?
Yes.
And you worry about those behind you because if you aren't successful,
yes,
you don't want it to get attributed like, oh, well, you're the first one and look at this big disaster kind of thing. So you not only have, I guess, the concerns about doing the best for your organization, but you do worry about making sure that you do it really well. And so that other people say, yeah, you know what? She might be the first one, but she did a really fabulous job, and that should open the door for the future. Now, the issue of failure, I don't think that's easy for anyone, right? And I guess what I would suggest is maybe trying to reframe it. So oftentimes some of the toughest things that I've experienced in my career they seemed like they were real setbacks or failure at the time, but in reality, looking back at it, they become like part of the mosaic, right? There's this Chinese proverb, and I have this beautiful picture of like a bowl, and it's like if you drop a bowl and it cracks, like in that culture, you
glue it back together with gold.
With gold, so that it becomes like something more beautiful, and something that you appreciate more than before it dropped and broke into pieces. So I think trying to reframe those setbacks in that way. And then the other thing is just, it sounds cliche, but it's so true, recognizing that it really is how you respond to those things. And I guess the lessons I've learned from that is like, don't internalize other people's stuff. And never quit, like never give up on your passion or your purpose. You just keep going no matter what. And eventually it all comes out in the wash, so to speak.
Nice. I like that. I love that. Taking a step back and looking at it from the perspective of the mosaic, I thought that was like really powerful imagery for me as well. Because when you're in the thick of it, that's all you can see, like literally. And it's so hard to like get perspective, right? Yeah. How do you maintain this perspective as as a leader? You've seen the challenges even in the past year or 2 years that we've had the pandemic.
Yeah, so I'm a real believer in never like getting too sucked into the press about you, right? So you're always going to have people who love you no matter what and think like you're the best in sliced bread. Yeah. And you're always going to have those people who think like you're the worst possible person they've ever met. And so I think especially a senior leader, like you can't get too caught up in the highs and you can't
the lows.
Get caught up in the lows. And I love that quote, like, it's really none of your opinion what other people think of you, right? Like, I just stay focused on mission and students in my world. And I tell that to my team all the time. We're going to be mission focused and student driven. And if we do that really well, the rest is going to take care of itself. And I really believe that.
I love that. I think that's really beautiful. And it gave me perspective actually for, the challenge of like all the extra chatter that happens is like, whether you have a difficult manager right now or you have a difficult team or whatever it is, do they like me? Do they not like me? And we tend to like always try to socialize for positivity, which then, like it sways as the mood sways and it brings highs and lows in our life. And sometimes it even brings that work home because of those highs and lows. And really staying in the middle, I think is a really great way of, it's almost meditative in some way. I feel like it's like a great way of just like not shushing the world around you and keeping a mission.
Yeah, and it's for me, I think one of the greatest challenges, at least as a younger leader, was you have to continue to listen, right? Because sometimes the things that you most want to not listen to, there's an element of truth to it that you really need to like reflect on or whatever. So now I find it easier to listen, to reflect on what I'm getting, but not to internalize it, especially if it's really inconsistent with the data. I tend to be very analytical and very data driven. And it's amazing to me how unusual that is in the world today, right? But I'm here to serve, right? And I serve all kinds of people who have all kinds of different perspectives. And so you have to listen and like, try to consider all those different perspectives, but not internalize all that stuff. Otherwise, you get paralyzed and can't make decisions, especially difficult decisions.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. And I think I want to close this, I think like personal chapter perspective of your professional career. We can jump on other things in a second, but I would love to know how was it for you to be a mom of 3 boys and a professional woman? I know like you like to talk about that, and I am a mom of 3 girls, and I have a full-time job as well, and this podcast and other things that I do. And so I guess I wonder, like, they're fuel, but they're also like a challenge. And how was that experience for you?
Well, I have to say these women who like always seem to have it all together and it seems really easy and that was never me, right?
Never me either.
It's like it's super hard. And I think we just have to be real about that. I always say to younger people, to me, the most important decision you make in your life is who your partner's going to be. Because I can honestly say, without my husband, Jay, and we just celebrated our 35th anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
Saturday. We met at Loyola and we've just, I don't know, it was like love at first sight and it's been an amazing journey with him. But he is such a devoted father and such an active father with our children that I often say none of this that I've done at all, whatever small contributions I make to the world, they are like solely with him next to me as a partner. Couldn't do anything without him.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing, I need to give a real shout out to my mom who this last year and to my mother-in-law. Because for years, those women helped me do my mother work. And without those two women and their support in helping to raise and love and nurture my children, I also can't imagine doing what I've done. So I think that's the thing. It would be easy to sit here and say, oh, all is me, but that would be like disingenuous. It's like a team approach every step of the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, it takes a village. I'm glad to hear that your family was supportive of your career and your ambitions as well, because that doesn't always happen. Navigating the challenges of continuing to climb up the ladder and perhaps it's taken more time and effort and moments of really intense work.
Yeah.
That has taken you away. Have you gained a perspective given COVID, given the virtual stay at home type of work at home type of scenario, and how it was where it was most of the time in the office or all the time in the office, and perhaps for you it's still all the time in the office, so it may be different, but maybe for some of your employees you have gained a little some perspective about this. But the difference between before, where it was always in the office, and now it could be a hybrid world, how do you see potentially like even that affecting like the way women interact with their professional careers and or their family life at this point?
So I'd like to take that in two different directions, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Because when you talked about, being away from your family and that sort of thing, I want to pick up on socioeconomic status. And part of the reason I want to do this is because I grew up in a lower middle class family. And so my parents didn't have the same opportunities. My grandparents didn't have the same opportunities. And I have to say, there's been some African American women writers who talk about this, that sort of ambivalence that I think existed with my family in terms of, is she really going to forget about like where she came from and, the neighborhood and our family culture or whatever. And so I want to acknowledge that because, I lead a Hispanic serving institution.
Yes.
Where the majority of our population are Latinx or Black students, and many of them are Pell eligible, just like I was. And I think you have to maneuver that with your family together, right? Or at least I did. So I just want to own that and give that some space here. And then in terms of the work from home, that really hasn't been my experience during COVID, but it certainly has been the experience of a number of our faculty and staff around campus. And, I think we just need to be really sensitive to people. So we're putting our protocols into place to have them come back during the fall and, or giving them the opportunity to let us know if there are extenuating medical or religious or personal things that require them to continue some kind of hybrid model. And so we're just trying to deal with that on a case-to-case basis, but hoping to have the vast majority of people back in the office. Because honestly, Marina, in my opinion, it just makes it easier to do the work of the university. You have some here and some hybrid. You need somebody to coordinate the technology, and we've been really blessed in this time together that we haven't had any glitches. There's always glitches. And there's so much work that gets done, just like when you walk out of your office and run into somebody in the hall, right? Or in the diner or something.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping we can all get back sooner versus later.
Yeah. I guess there's also there's the part where now we can, definitely talk about what is that future of education, and potentially I am a high proponent of actually a hybrid model personally, because actually, let me tell you a little bit of my experience. So I started college actually in the Dominican Republic. And the way that happens in the Dominican Republic is after your first year, which I went over and then transferred to the United States, most people go to college only at night in the evening, because most people will hold a job throughout the day. So most classes, university classes, are held between 6 p.m. and midnight. And so what you'll see is a lot of people, between the ages of 18 and 25 that have a double shift. Like they go to work during the day, they work their 8 to 5, and then they show up at school at university at 6, and then they'll study between 6 and 11, 6 to midnight. So coming to the US and realizing that actually that was not possible, because most classes were held throughout the day, it seemed like a privilege for some reason that I couldn't afford. And so I actually figured out a way in which I was working and studying most of the time. I had to pay for my own schooling, and I didn't qualify for any federal help because I'm an immigrant.
Sure.
So that doesn't work for me. And I don't know, there is some type of privilege that comes right now from the way I think universities are generally structured in the States. And I was wondering if you have any perspective from not only your experiences, as a woman who has gone through this process, but also as a leader of a university. And what are you looking at, and what are some of the drivers to make perhaps university even more inclusive in the future and more sensitive to people's economic and socioeconomic situations?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great point. So one of the things I'm most proud of that we've been able to do at Saint Xavier is maintain really low tuition. We are the most affordable Catholic university in the entire state of Illinois.
Yeah, and you got actually a national award too recently.
Yeah, and at the same time we did that, we're really doubling down on student success. Meaning we're part of this ILEA initiative, which is the Illinois Equity and Attainment Initiative, which is really about making sure that we have equitable outcomes regardless of racial or ethnic background, regardless of socioeconomic background. But this is the tension, I think. So I agree with everything that you just said. We need to try to provide education to everybody who wants an education, right? By making it accessible and affordable. The other thing that we know, though, is especially for first-year students, they tend to do better, at least on our campus, if they can develop strong personal relationships with caring adults on campus that can help them maneuver the system. So what we try to do is keep it really affordable. We also try to provide a lot of work-study jobs on campus so that students are actually in the learning community while they're also helping to support their families. And then we try to survey our students multiple times a year so that we can really understand if their preference is to do hybrid or completely remote. We always try to make that available to them. But remember what I said about the power of liberal learning? A big piece of that is to be in relation to others, because at the end of the day, I really think education is about helping us become more human.
Yeah.
And yes, I think technology, we can leverage it, but I also think there's something really important about that personal connection, especially for first generation students who don't have the kind of necessarily the kind of capital to be able to maneuver our institutions. So I think it's a combo, but I think your point is really important moving forward. We have to make ourselves accessible and affordable regardless of the situation of our students and our families. And that's what we're trying to do.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. And regardless of whether this is a vision for Xavier or Saint Xavier University or not, if you had to imagine, like out of your complete imagination, like what education could look like in a perfect world, because I'm sure you've thought about this. I think about this all the time for my children too. Is like, what do I want my children education to be like, because it's such a fundamental part of their life right now. What can you imagine that could be like? Give me some ideas.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess when I think about this, I think the most powerful form of education tends to be based on that personal relationship, however that is mediated, whether it's, face to face or through technology, but that tends to be individualized. Like the most powerful experiences I've ever had are when I have somebody who is further along than me, who tries to deeply understand my strengths, my weaknesses, where I'm trying to go, and almost individualizes the educational experience to where I am at that moment, right?
I love it, yeah.
I think that sort of personalized, that personalized education is really powerful. And then the other thing for higher education, for sure, how do we get to a place where anybody at any moment can access what they need and what they want 24/7 in whatever format is going to democratize education the most, right? Because ultimately, I really do believe that education is about liberating people, right? It's about freeing their mind. It's about liberating them from wherever they are in the social structure. Yeah. And that's the reason this issue of accessibility and affordability has been so central to the vision of what we're trying to do here on the south side of Chicago.
Yes.
We get that this private education is not just for individual privilege. This really is a public good in the sense that we hope we change the lives of our students, who then go out into their communities and change their families and their neighborhoods and ultimately the world for the better, right? Like that's our why. That's what drives us every day.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I got even if we're not in person, I got chills from that. So thank you for sharing.
I did too. I still like. I think that's the only way you can do this work. It's really hard work, right? But like you have to find your why, that cause that's much broader than yourself. And for us, it's about helping those generations of students discover their purpose and just go on and blossom and do amazing things in the world.
Oh, that's beautiful. More tactically, how are students doing nowadays? SAT, not SAT, then virtual and then not virtual, and then campus and then non-campus. Like, how is your student body experimenting with this, different ways of education? Where do you think they're standing? I know you're very data driven, so I'm sure you've done already some studies and some surveys throughout the student body. Where do you feel they are, and where do you feel like it's gonna go in the next year or so for them?
I think it's been really, really challenging and really, really hard. I worry all the time about some of the mental health challenges. Again, when I think about our student population, the majority of whom are first generation students, that's already a big transition to college. And then to have your college experience interrupted by a pandemic and your classes maybe in person and then online, it's just really, really, it's been really, really tough. And I think they're going to need a lot of extra support. So we've been trying to do like individualized advising, small group advising. We've added resources to our counseling center. We've added staff in our advising center. I think they require a lot more intrusive advising, a lot more mentoring. So we're just, we were so lucky a couple of years ago. We received a $3 million federal grant, and we used all that money to just add additional staff to be able to help students. We also even started things like a food pantry, because as you pointed out early, there's a number of our students who are really struggling with out of school issues that are impacting in school learning and performance. So we hired a social worker. We started a food pantry. We've created partnerships in the community so that we can refer students and their families. So, in some ways, we're almost becoming, I won't say we're there yet, Marina, because I don't want to overstate this, but we are becoming more of a one-stop kind of shop than we were, say, 10 years ago. And I think that's going to continue in the future because it's been accelerated with the pandemic and the effect of the pandemic.
I would even say like a part of the community rather than a standalone institution.
Well, I often use this term, which is not my term. I don't know where I learned this from years ago, but it's like a communiversity. So linking the resources of the university to the community and trying to make sure that we invite our community knowledge and wisdom and resources into our campus community. So I love that idea of communiversity. And in fact, it's part of our strategic plan to have robust community engagement, because we realize partnerships are the wave of the future.
Yeah. Side note about partnerships, super interested in apprenticeships as well. As part of, the education process, like, there's the saying of, college is not for everybody, but there's always some type of education that is for somebody. Are you guys just, I'm curious, I don't even know this, but are you guys doing any apprenticeship or partnering with apprenticeships, or what is your take on that part of the education?
Sure. So our tagline is actually that we educate students for competence, character, and career success. And I love those because the competence part is what every institution does, right? The character part is really associated to our mission as a Mercy Catholic institution. Like, we think it's just as important who our students become as what our students go on to do, right? So that's the character piece. And then the career success piece is a part that we've really started focusing on over the past 5 years. And that includes all kinds of applied opportunities. So we have students doing student-faculty collaborative research. We have students doing studies for nonprofits. We have students obviously working in the Catholic and public K-12 school system. And I don't just mean like the student teachers. We actually have like our marketing students in the Graham School of Business helping to do advertising plans or marketing strategy for some of these organizations. And obviously tons of internships through our Center for Student Success and Career Services. So in that sense, I feel like part of everything that we do is with an eye to what our graduates will do after they leave Saint Xavier. Because after all, the true measure of our success is who our students become and what they go on to do, right? So we got to do something outside the four walls of the classroom.
Absolutely. Oh, that's so good. No, this is perfect because we need diversity in the things that we're doing. I think like the old like assembly line type of education does not work for us anymore.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What do you? I know you've mentioned this before in the interview, but I just want to wrap this this portion with a question that I think perhaps is personal for you. But like you've mentioned that you're like a white woman leading a student body that is mostly Hispanic and Black.
Yeah.
Your experience is obviously not of a person who was privileged in her upbringing. So I'm sure you can definitely relate to your student body, and you come from experience when you're doing the activism that you're doing within your university. Yeah. I wonder about the perspective given the social economic situation or the social situation right now. And I have no doubt that just talking to you, like, you're a very nice person. And I'm so happy you're leading this university the way you're leading it. I just wonder about the perspective and maybe what the student body, if they feel anything about it, if you know, if the community feels some sort of way about it, and how do you present yourself to really connect with your community from that perspective?
Sure. Well, as a sociologist, my PhD was in the area of race, class, and gender, right? So I feel like from an intellectual background, that's sort of where I come from in terms of my area of interest or expertise. So in my graduate program, I actually worked with homeless substance abusers on the streets of New Orleans, right? And I think that gave me a sort of unique experience and a unique perspective about relating to those who have been marginalized, those who haven't been given the same opportunities. So I think like all of those experiences kind of prepare you for where you are today. I don't really know what our students would think about this. I know we have conversations about like our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative. So as part of our strategic planning and as part of our mission, I mean, one of our core values is diversity and trying to really create opportunities to become a multiracial community that provides opportunities for everyone. And I think that's probably what's most important to them, is to have a leadership team that's really committed to try to open avenues for them. So, you know, whether that be through things like using our CARES funding to forgive balances since the start of the pandemic, or, you know, creating more inclusive practices on campus, like having our liturgies in Spanish, for example. Like, I think it's all of those things. I think it's like having their culture represented in curricular and co-curricular opportunities. We're in the midst of hiring the inaugural Chief Diversity Officer, making sure that that person is elevated to report directly to the president and that they have a portfolio of responsibility that expands the entire institution. I think those are the things that they care about. I think it's less like the color of my skin and more how I lead and how we invest our budget dollars, the kinds of decisions that we make, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. And I also wanna know, like, how the school has empathized with the student body, given, you know, Black Lives Matters and all that, and all those social events at the same time.
So we have amazing faculty who have been deeply involved and committed to really all the social movements that have taken place over the last few years, right? And I think our student life staff has also been sensitive and created opportunities, whether it be just open mic opportunities, whether it be vigils to raise awareness about some of the injustice happening in our community, or as part of policing and those sorts of things. So of course there's always like those types of events. I think, you know, our counselors and our mentors have strong personal relationships with students. So I think there's always that opportunity. But then we've really tried to take it up, like even to the senior leadership team. Like we read books about this issue so that we could be more sensitive when we go out and interact with the different divisions of the university. But quite honestly, Marina, I think this is probably one of the greatest challenges for all higher education leadership, because we're all teaching and learning. And, you know, it requires vulnerability. Like you have to be willing to say, this is how I understood it, and you're telling me something different. And like, I just need you to have some compassion and help me move through it, right? And I think that's the challenge, because I think it's such a difficult situation and there's so much pain surrounding the issue that often the walls get built and people are just uncomfortable kind of saying, I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to convey. Like, can we just keep the conversation going? And I guess that's at the bottom line what we're trying to do. We're just trying to create spaces to keep the conversation going. Not at all saying we have it figured out or we truly understand what it's like to walk in your shoes at this moment, but help us understand what we can do differently to better meet your needs. And I think that's all you can do. You go to the work with an open heart and an open mind, right?
And as a long life learner, I think that's exactly how you have portrayed this and how you've come across as being a continuous learner of all things human related versus just, not, practical things, and just really learning from your faculty and your students and really trying to understand and meet them where they are. So thank you for your hard work for this community.
It's a privilege. It really is a privilege and an honor.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. We are about to wrap up here. And I'm going to get to the outros. These are really cute and fun questions. So I'm going to fire away whenever you're ready.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What is one thing that we don't know about you that you can share?
Probably that I've been really deeply influenced by Ignatian spirituality. And I think that really drives a lot in my life. It's a very practical spirituality. And it goes back to one of your earlier questions about how do you handle tough situations or failure? Ignatian spirituality teaches us that you find God in all things, even the most painful things. So I think that would be one thing, is the influence Ignatian spirituality has had not just on my life, but on my leadership. Because we didn't really talk about this much, but I think leadership is about who you are, not what you do. And I think we're all leading all the time, right? Spaces.
Yeah, leading our families, leading our
communities. Yeah, absolutely.
Beautiful. What is a book you have gifted the most?
Two, because I always give them together. So one is a book called Heroic Leadership by Chris Lowney.
Okay.
And the second would be The Ignatian Guide to Almost Everything by James Martin. Those are the two that for sure I've gifted more than any other.
Very beautiful. Thank you for that. What is the book you would write?
Oh, the book I would write. What's
the title?
The Promise and Potential Pitfalls of the University Presidency. I really will write that book.
I'm looking forward to it. I hope I get one of the first signed copies.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to make a note of it. You will get the first signed copy.
Yes. One of the first. I don't pretend to be the first, but top 50. I'm happy. Where I think my last question for you is going to be this, is if you could leave the community with one thing that universities can bring and that you are fulfilling through that purpose, what is that one thing that you would want to leave us with?
Hope. I think hope. To me, education is all about hope, because if we can help more people discover their passion, discover their purpose that's greater than themselves, that has to lead to more hopeful neighborhoods, communities, and the world, right? So I think hope would be the thing.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Laurie.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming to my podcast, and thank you for having us in your office. Thank you. I'll talk to you next time.
Okay. Thanks.